The last time Cole Brandt had been on Creek Road, he'd been 17, drunk on stolen beer, and trying to impress a girl who would later break his heart. Even then, the road had felt wrong. The ancient oaks, heavy with Spanish moss, clawed at the sky, their branches like skeletal fingers. They choked out the California sun, leaving the narrow ribbon of asphalt in a perpetual twilight. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and wild sage, always seemed a few degrees cooler here, a place where secrets festered in the shadows. Now, 25 years later, the chill was back, but it had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the ice of dread solidifying in his gut. He gunned the engine of his rented sedan, the sound unnaturally loud in the canyon's oppressive silence. The file on the passenger seat was a mockery of his life's work. He, Cole Brandt, the LAPD's star arson investigator, the man who could read a fire's story in the scorch marks on a wall, who could smell the ghost of an accelerant in a cold ruin, was now chasing a ghost story. The video was only 7 seconds long. 7 seconds of corrupted data of a nightmare clawing its way into reality. It had arrived in a scrambled text from his daughter Maya 3 days after she'd vanished. Most of it was just digital snow, a cacophony of distorted pixels. But for a fleeting moment, the image stabilized. It was dark, illuminated only by the frantic bounce of a phone's flashlight. The beam cut through what looked like a dense thicket of manzanita, picking out the glint of a chain-link fence. Then, movement. A shape, impossibly tall and gaunt, detached itself from the deeper shadows. It was black, not with the absence of light, but with the texture of char. The figure took a lurching step forward. The flashlight beam flared wildly, and Maya's scream, sharp and terrified, was cut short by a sound like a car door being ripped from its hinges. Then, nothing. The Ojai Valley Sheriff's department had been polite but dismissive. A missing persons report was filed. They'd searched the area around her last known location, the opulent, isolated Elysian Grove wellness retreat just off Highway 33. They found her car, a sensible hybrid, parked near a trailhead, untouched. Her hiking gear was still in the trunk. The local consensus was that the 4-year-old investigative journalist, known for pushing boundaries, had simply gone off-grid for a story. But Cole knew better. He knew Maya. Headstrong, yes. Reckless, occasionally. But never careless. And he knew that sound. It was the sound of metal yielding to brute force. A sound he'd heard 100 times in the twisted wreckage of burned-out vehicles. And he knew the legend. He'd grown up marinating in it. A horror story whispered around campfires and in the back seats of cars parked on this very road. The Charman of Ojai, born from a catastrophic wildfire in 1948. A father and son caught in the inferno. The father, horribly burned but alive, went mad with grief, skinned his dead son, and hung the hide from a bridge. Now his ghost, a carbonized specter of vengeance, haunted these canyon roads, attacking anyone foolish enough to stop. It was a story his own father, Sheriff Jim Brandt, had spent the last decade of his career trying to debunk. The 1948 fire was real. A man and his son did die. But the rest? Local folklore. Campfire nonsense. Yet, every few years, someone would vanish out here. A car would be found with its doors bizarrely mangled, the interior reeking of soot and pine. Jim Brandt never solved it. The file remained open, a black mark on an otherwise stellar career, a source of quiet obsession that had eaten at him until the day he died. Cole had run from that legacy, from the suffocating small-town superstitions, from the cloying scent of orange blossoms, and the ever-present threat of fire that clung to the valley like a shroud. He'd run straight to the belly of the beast, Los Angeles, and dedicated his life to the cold, hard science of combustion. Fire wasn't a monster. It was a chemical reaction, predictable, Explainable. He'd built a wall of logic and procedure around the deep secret fear the Ojai Hills had instilled in him as a boy. Now, that wall was crumbling. Maya was gone, and the only clue was a 7-second video of a monster from his father's past. He pulled up to a familiar landmark, a single-lane concrete bridge arching over a dry, boulder-strewn creek bed. Asterisk. The Times Bridge. The air grew heavier. Cole got out of the car, his city shoes crunching on the gravel shoulder. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the low hum of his own anxiety. He walked to the center of the bridge, the same spot where, according to the legend, you were supposed to get out, leave your car door open, and call out for the charman. He did no such thing. Instead, he scanned the area with an investigator's eye. The gnarled branches of an oak tree scraped against the bridge's concrete railing. He ran his hand along the rough surface, his fingers tracing old graffiti. Then he felt it, a patch on the railing, smoother than the rest. He leaned closer. It was a burn mark, but not from a simple fire. This was deeper, more focused. The concrete was vitrified, melted into a glassy black smear. He'd only seen damage like that in industrial fires, temperatures far exceeding a simple brush fire or a prankster's lighter. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. Asterisk. Heard you're in town. Your father was a good man. If you're looking for your daughter, meet me. The Deer Lodge. 1 hour. Don't talk to the cops. Asterisk. The Deer Lodge was a relic, a taxidermy-filled dive bar that smelled of stale beer and regret. Cole found his contact in a dark corner booth. He was a man in his late 50s, with a weathered face and the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much of the valley's dark side. He wore the tan and green uniform of the Ojai Sheriff's Department. Deputy Sheriff Davis, he said, extending a calloused hand. Knew your dad. Rode with him a few times before he retired. Hell of a lawman. You said not to talk to the cops, Cole stated, not taking the offered seat. I am the cops, Brandt. But I'm not the department, Davis said, his voice a low rumble. Sheriff Brody's new. A transplant from Santa Barbara. He thinks Elysian Grove and its rich clientele are the town's salvation. Won't hear a word against them. I, on the other hand, have been pulling folks out of this canyon my whole life. Things go missing up here. People. Cole sat down, his gaze unwavering. You know something about my daughter? Davis nodded slowly. Maya was smart. Too smart. She wasn't just on a hike. She was asking questions. About Elysian Grove. About its founder, this Julian Thorne character. And about the other ones. Other ones? 4 people in the last 2 years. All hikers who vanished near Thorne's property. Cases went cold faster than a winter creek. Maya must have found a connection. Davis leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Thorne's a snake. Got this whole town charmed. He throws money around, hosts fundraisers. But up on that hill, he's a king in his own little kingdom. Private security, high fences, and whispers of strange goings-on, late-night deliveries. Chanting. A cult, Cole said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Something like that. Look, your dad chased the Charman story for years. He thought it was a cover. A local boogeyman to scare people away from something real. He was convinced someone was using the legend to hide their crimes. Davis slid a folded piece of paper across the sticky table. This is a map of the Elysian Grove property. An old service entrance off Creek Road, about a mile past the bridge. Fence is weak there. If Maya was trying to get in, unseen, that's where she'd go. It's a place to start. Cole picked up the map. Why help me? Why risk your job? Davis stared into his beer. Jim Brandt was my mentor. He never let a case go, no matter how strange. He deserved to solve this one. Maybe his son can. Under the cloak of a moonless night, Cole found the service entrance exactly where Davis had said it would be. A section of the chain-link fence, overgrown with coyote brush, was peeled back just enough for a person to squeeze through. The metal around the opening was warped and blackened, the edges melted into jagged teeth. A familiar, sickening signature. He pushed through, the night swallowing him whole. He moved with a practiced stealth, a ghost in the chaparral. The grounds of Elysian Grove were unnaturally quiet. Manicured paths wound between glass and steel bungalows, the architectural equivalent of a sterile smile. But beyond the pristine guest areas, the property stretched deep into the untamed canyon. He followed a faint trail, one that was clearly not part of the official groundskeeping. It led him to a clearing, dominated by a large, modern structure that looked more like a bunker than a meditation hall. Low, recessed light emanated from a single slit window. Cole crept to the window, his heart hammering against his ribs. He peered inside. The room was circular, the walls made of dark, unadorned stone. In the center, a man stood before a simple stone altar. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a white linen suit, his silver hair catching the light. He had the kind of predatory charisma that could sell salvation or poison with equal conviction. This had to be Julian Thorne. Thorne was not alone. Flanking him were two men built like redwoods, their faces impassive. And on the altar, Cole's breath caught in his throat. It was Maya. She was unconscious, bound with thick leather straps. Thorne raised his hands, his voice echoing in the stone chamber, smooth and hypnotic. The land thirsts. The old flame gutters. A new spark is needed to appease the Guardian, to renew the pact that grants us prosperity and protection. Cole felt a primal rage surge through him, hot and blinding. He backed away from the window, his mind racing. He was one man against at least three, probably more. He needed leverage. He needed a weapon. He needed to burn this place to the ground. His hand went to his pocket. To the cold steel of the Zippo lighter he always carried a habit, an irony he never acknowledged. He flicked it open, the small flame dancing in the darkness. For a moment, his own deep-seated terror threatened to choke him. The smell of the fluid, the whisper of the flame. It took him back to a place he never wanted to go. To the memory of his father's smoke-stained office. The gruesome photos from the 1948 fire pinned to a corkboard. The image of a man burned beyond recognition. He snapped the lighter shut, mastering the fear. Fear was a luxury. He had to get Maya out. He circled the building, searching for another way in. A steel door, likely a fire exit, was set into the rear wall. Locked, of course. He examined the hinges, the frame. Then he saw it. A faint, oily residue near the lock, and a microscopic scratch on the jamb. Someone had forced this door recently. Maya. She had gotten in. Maybe she'd left a way for him to follow. His phone vibrated. Another text from Davis. Asterisk. Thorne's doing something tonight. A special solstice ceremony. Get her out of there, Brandt. Wildfire warning just went into effect. Red flag. Hills are a tinderbox. This whole valley could go up. Asterisk. The message ended with a new sense of urgency. A wildfire. Tonight. The thought sent a jolt of ice through Cole's veins, colder and sharper than his rage. The ceremony, the fire warning. It couldn't be a coincidence. He put his shoulder to the door and pushed. Nothing. He braced himself, aimed a kick just beside the handle, putting all his weight and fury behind it. The lock, already weakened, gave with a splintering crack. The corridor inside was dark and cold. He moved silently, his ears straining. He could hear Thorn's voice, a low, rhythmic chant, growing louder. He rounded a corner and found himself at the back of the circular chamber. Thorn had his back to him, his arms outstretched towards Maya. "The blood of the unwilling sanctifies the offering," Thorn intoned. "The fear of the trespasser awakens the flame." Cole saw his opening. The two guards were focused on their leader, mesmerized by the ritual. He pulled the spare canister of lighter fluid from his jacket, an investigator's tool for testing flammability. He unscrewed the cap. He didn't need a big fire, just a distraction. He squirted a line of fluid along the base of a heavy tapestry depicting a stylized forest fire. He flicked his Zippo, the flint sparking. The flame caught with a sudden Times whoosh asterisk. The dry tapestry went up like a sheet of newspaper, flames racing towards the ceiling. "What is this?" Thorn spun around, his composure shattering. The guards turned, their eyes wide with alarm. In that split second of confusion, Cole charged. He slammed into the first guard, driving his shoulder into the man's solar plexus. The man folded with a grunt. The second guard lunged, but Cole was already moving, grabbing a heavy ceremonial brazier and swinging it in a wide arc. It connected with the side of the man's head with a sickening thud. Thorn stared at him, his handsome face contorted with fury, not fear. "You, the investigator's son, you cannot stop this. You are merely adding fuel to the fire." Cole ignored him, rushing to the altar. He fumbled with the thick leather straps binding Maya's wrists. They were cinched tight, the buckles complex. As his fingers worked, a new sound reached him from outside, a sound that made the hair on his arms stand up. It was a low, guttural crackle, like a giant log shifting in, a cosmic fireplace. It was accompanied by a smell, the smell from his father's coldest cases, the smell of charred pine and cooked meat. The fire he had set was already dying down, choked by the stone walls. But a new light was beginning to flicker from the entrance of the chamber, an angry orange glow that cast long, dancing shadows. A figure stepped through the doorway, silhouetted against the flames. It was tall, impossibly thin, and blacker than the smoke that billowed around it. Its flesh was a ruin of hardened char, cracked and fissured like volcanic rock. Where its eye should have been, two malevolent embers glowed with an inner heat. It was the thing from Maya's video. It was the Char Man. The entity's gaze swept the room, ignoring Cole, ignoring the guards, its glowing eyes fixed on Thorn. It let out a sound, a rasping, bubbling hiss, the sound of air being forced through burned lungs. Thorn laughed, a high, unhinged sound. "You see? He answers my call. The land protects its own." But the creature took a lurching step towards Thorn, not with reverence, but with a palpable, ancient malice. This was not a guardian. It was a predator, and the ritual had just rung its dinner bell. Thorn's confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of genuine terror. Cole finally ripped the last strap free. He scooped Maya into his arms. She was terrifyingly light. "Maya, wake up!" he yelled, shaking her. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and clouded with whatever they had drugged her with. He had to get out. Now. The main entrance was blocked by a monster from a nightmare. The back corridor was their only chance. He half-dragged, half-carried Maya towards the exit, his lungs burning from the smoke. Behind him, Thorn screamed. It was not a ritual chant, but a shriek of pure agony. Cole risked a glance back. The Charman had Thorn by the arm. Where its carbonized fingers touched the white linen suit, the fabric blackened and smoked. Thorn's flesh was sizzling beneath it. "Davis, now!" Thorn shrieked. Cole's blood ran cold. Asterisk Davis? Asterisk. The fire door he had broken through was suddenly blocked. Deputy Sheriff Davis stood there, his service revolver aimed squarely at Cole's chest. His friendly, weary face was gone, replaced by a mask of cold fanaticism. "I'm sorry, Brandt," Davis said, his voice flat. "Your father was a fool. He thought he was solving a crime. He was just blundering through a history he couldn't comprehend. My family has served this valley for generations. We are the true keepers. The false ally, the twist of the knife." Davis hadn't been helping him. He'd been maneuvering him, using him as the final piece of the ritual. The trespasser. Thorne thought he could control it, Davis continued, a grim satisfaction in his voice. He's arrogant. He thinks power can be taken, but it must be earned, through sacrifice. Your daughter was the offering, but your fear, your terror, that's the real spice. It makes the entity strong. Outside, the wind howled, a hot, dry Santa Ana breath. The distant orange glow on the horizon was brighter now. The wildfire Davis had warned him about. It was real, and it was getting closer. The char man finished with Thorne, tossing the smoldering, silent form aside like a piece of burned wood. It turned, its smoldering eyes fixing on the next source of life in the room. On Cole and Maya. Cole shoved Maya behind him. He was trapped. A fanatic with a gun in front of him, a monster made of fire behind him, and the whole world was about to burn. His mind, the investigator's mind, went into overdrive, shutting out the panic. He assessed the scene not as a victim, but as a puzzle. Asterisk, fire behavior, fuel, oxygen, heat. The fire triangle. Asterisk. The monster was a living incarnation of that triangle. How do you fight a fire? You don't. You starve it. You contain it. You redirect it. Davis, you're insane, Cole said, his voice steady. Buying time. This thing isn't a guardian. It's a mindless force, like a wildfire. It will consume you, too. It is the will of the land, Davis yelled over the growing roar from outside. The charman started towards them, its movements jerky but unnervingly fast. It left smoking footprints on the stone floor. Cole saw his chance. It wasn't a good one, but it was the only one he had. He pushed Maya towards the wall. "Stay down!" Then he ran, not away from the monster, but directly towards Davis. Davis's eyes widened in surprise. He fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet tore through the fleshy part of Cole's left shoulder, the impact spinning him around. Pain, white-hot and blinding, flared through him. But he didn't stop. He crashed into Davis, sending them both tumbling out into the night. They landed on the gravel path just as the charman emerged from the building, its form seeming to draw strength from the smoky, superheated air. The wildfire was no longer a distant glow. It was a living, breathing beast, cresting the nearby ridge, embers the size of fists raining down around them. Cole scrambled to his feet, his left arm useless. Davis was reaching for his dropped gun. Cole kicked it away, sending it skittering into the brush. Davis lunged, tackling Cole to the ground. They wrestled in the dirt and ash, two men fighting for opposing insane causes, while a nightmare bore down on them. The monster was focused on them, drawn to the violence, to the raw emotion. It raised a clawed, smoldering hand. Cole knew that touch would be the end, and then he saw it. Parked just off the service road, hidden in a thicket of manzanita, was Davis's sheriff's cruiser. His mind made the leap. A vehicle, gasoline, an enclosed space, a narrow canyon road, asterisk A, backdraft. Asterisk he broke free from Davis's grasp, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder, and sprinted for the cruiser. The charman changed course, following him, its crackling gait surprisingly swift. It was faster than a man could run. Cole fumbled with the cruiser's door, his fingers slick with blood. He wrenched it open and dove inside, slamming it shut a second before the creature reached it. The monster clawed at the window, its touch leaving sizzling molten trails on the safety glass. The inside of the car filled with the smell of burning plastic. Cole scrambled over the console into the driver's seat. The keys were in the ignition. He twisted them. The engine roared to life. He slammed the car into reverse, tires spinning, and peeled away from the building. In the rearview mirror, he saw Davis get to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Then his gaze shifted to Maya, who was stumbling out of the ritual chamber, dazed but on her feet. Cole spun the wheel, lining the car up. He wasn't running away. He was repositioning. He floored the accelerator, aiming the cruiser not at the monster, but at the fuel pump of a nearby maintenance generator. The impact was jarring. Metal shrieked. The pump ruptured, and gasoline began to gush out, forming a shimmering, volatile pool. The charman, drawn by the sound and the motion, turned towards the wreck. It stood in the growing puddle of fuel, seemingly unharmed, its ember eyes fixated on Cole. Cole climbed out of the wrecked cruiser, his Zippo already in his good hand. "Hey!" he yelled, his voice raw. "You want fear? You want a sacrifice?" He flicked the lighter. The small flame seemed pathetic against the apocalyptic backdrop of the approaching wildfire. Davis saw what was about to happen. He screamed, a wordless cry of denial, and started running towards the monster, towards his god. "No!" Cole didn't hesitate. He threw the lighter. It tumbled end over end, a tiny star falling into a pool of liquid night. The world erupted in a flash of white-hot fury. The gasoline ignited with a deafening times womb asterisk. A fireball engulfed the charman and the charging Davis, the concussion wave knocking Cole off his feet. The heat was immense, a physical blow that stole the air from his lungs. He pushed himself up, his vision swimming. The fire he'd created wasn't just a fire, it was a controlled explosion, a backdraft. Sucked in by the intense heat and the narrow topography, the air rushed back towards the point of ignition, feeding the flames into a churning, inescapable vortex of hellfire. The monster and its last disciple were trapped in the heart of a miniature Sunday. Through the shimmering heat haze, Cole saw the charman thrashing, not in pain, but in rage, its form being simultaneously fed and consumed by the inferno. It wasn't dead. He knew he couldn't kill it, but he had trapped it. He had given it the one thing it craved, an endless, all-consuming fire. "Cole!" Maya's voice cut through the roar. She was 50 feet away, her face smudged with soot, her eyes wide with terror and relief. He ran to her, his body screaming in protest, and pulled her away from the growing blaze. They fled down Creek Road, away from Elysian Grove, away from the pyre he had created. Behind them, the wildfire crested the ridge and descended into the canyon, a roaring tide of destruction. The two fires met, merging into a single, unstoppable conflagration. The woods, the ritual chamber, the haunted bridge, all of it was being consumed, cleansed by the very element that had cursed it. They didn't look back. They stumbled on through the smoke-choked darkness, their lungs aching, the heat at their backs like a pursuing demon. They finally collapsed miles down the road, just as the first sirens began to cut through the night. They were found at dawn, two smoke-stained figures huddled on the asphalt by a unit of weary firefighters advancing into the smoldering canyon. The sky was a bruised purple, choked with a gray haze. The air tasted of ash. Cole looked at Maya, her face illuminated by the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. They were alive. They had survived. He hadn't killed the legend of the Charman. He had simply given it a new origin story, burning away the secrets and the lies and leaving the monster to be consumed by its own myth, a fiery ghost in a scorched and silent land, the case was closed.